Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. An aunt of mine had her house burned down, and very unfortunately, she also died in the fire. However, the firemen were able to save my 6-year-old cousin. Of course, she experienced something that would disturb her for the rest of her life. My aunt had been a single mother. She hadn't seen or heard from the father in years, so he wasn't able to take custody of his daughter for a while. She came to live with us. My mom thought that if she was with a girl of her age, it would help her get better. It was really hard living with her and trying to get her to do anything. I used to love tea parties and would hold them often. I couldn't really get her to take part in them at all, though she would just understandably sit there silently and look sad. She rarely talked, and the only time she once did was to say that cup is empty, as if she didn't know we were supposed to just be playing. The girl slept in the same room as me, as I had 2 twin beds in the room. It was fine, and for the most part, she seemed to sleep well. Occasionally, though, she would have very bad nightmares and would wake up in the middle of the night screaming. My mom would always come to the room and grab her, hug her tight, and try to make her feel better. I have to admit, I didn't like having her around at only 8 years old. I guess I couldn't really appreciate what she was going through. I feel really bad about that now, especially since I've never had to lose my mom. But something about her creeped me out. She was always so quiet, only communicating with people, mostly with nods and shakes of the head. She would occasionally walk into the room and look around at everyone without coming in, and sit down in place. Then after a while, she would turn around and leave without a word. It was kind of creepy. One time my mom took us for a walk. We lived in a second-story apartment. When we left the apartment, she stopped and looked at the window to it. I tried to get her to keep walking, but she didn't want to. My mom didn't notice at first, and didn't notice when I asked the girl what she was looking at. In a very rare moment of her actually talking, she told me, "Mommy is in the window." Of course, that chilled me, and I didn't want much to do with her. When my mom came over and told us to keep up, she went ahead and started walking alongside my mom. As I looked up at the window, though I thought I saw a woman standing behind the sheer curtain, I felt my heart jump in my chest. I ran forward and grabbed my mother's hand. After that, I began to get a little bit scared of that house. I normally didn't, but that experience was enough to be pretty terrifying. The scariest thing though happened at night, and if I recall, it was about a week after what we saw in the window. That day, my cousin and I were pretty soundly sleeping when I heard some sort of creaking noise that woke me up from my sleep. I looked over at my cousin's bed, only to notice that she was sitting up in it. She was rocking back and forth, and that was what was making the creaking sound. She was just doing it over and over again. I called out to her, trying to get her attention. However, she wouldn't respond to me in any way. She just kept rocking back and forth, staring at a certain area. I turned and looked to where she was looking at, only to realize that it was the bedroom closet door, and the door was wide open. We always kept the door closed when we were sleeping. I asked my cousin if she saw her mom in the closet again, remembering what she told me about last week. At first, she didn't respond, but when I asked her again, she turned and looked at me. "That's not my mommy in the closet," she told me. I looked back to the closet and saw the shadow of a person standing inside. I screamed. For my mom. At the top of my lungs, my mom rushed into the room and immediately turned on the lights. She saw that both of us girls were terrified, and asked what was going on. I told her someone was hiding in our bedroom closet. My mom went in and searched, but somehow she didn't find anything. Both of us assured her that we'd really seen it. Though, my mom took us both into her room and let us sleep with her that night, although we didn't sleep great. It was the only way either of us could have gotten any sleep at all. My cousin stayed with us for about another 3 months after that. A paternal aunt asked my mom if she could take custody of the young girl. My mom was okay with that, mostly because the aunt was very wealthy and she thought she could provide a better life for her. I didn't see that cousin ever again after she left. I didn't see any figures in the window either, or in that closet ever again. I went back to sleeping comfortably in my own room. I was around 12 years old when this happened. It was a Saturday morning, and my parents were going out of town for the weekend. They left my older brother to babysit, but as soon as they left, pretty much he did too. So I'm sitting there in the living room watching TV by myself when the doorbell suddenly rings. Instead of looking through the peephole like a normal person, I flung the door open, eager for company. I thought it would be my neighbor, not two middle-aged men I'd never seen before, looking down at me. "Hi, there are your parents home." I didn't even hesitate when I told them, "No, they're actually out of town for the weekend." Holy shit. If you could slap a child, I would go back and slap myself silly. They exchanged glances between each other when the older-looking man said, "Well, I'm your landlord. We need to come inside and check a few things out for a minute." And that's when I realized just how much trouble I was in. I knew my landlord personally. He was a friend of the family, and he was not either of the men standing before me. Thank God for some quick thinking, because I told them, "Yeah, alright, but I need to grab something first." Before they could reply, I slammed the door shut and deadbolted it. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the phone, and dialed my mom's number. I remember crying, thinking, "Please pick up, please." When she did, the second I heard her voice, I broke down sobbing. "There's two guys at the front door, and they want to come in. One of them said he's the landlord, but it's not Mario, and I'm scared. Come home now." I heard pounding begin on the window. My mom must have heard it too, because next thing she said to me was, "Dad's on the phone with the police right now. You need to tell them that, shout at the top of your lungs that the cops are on their way. They know you're home alone, and they need to know you won't be for long. I'll be there soon." My parents were an hour away. How they made it home as fast as they did in 20 minutes, I'll never know. Through my tears, I yelled to the men as loud as I could that the cops were on their way. Hey, we weren't gonna hurt you. No need to cry. It's okay. We'll leave." Then there was silence. It seemed like a lifetime, but it was no less than 10 minutes later when the police arrived. I'll always remember the female officer who spoke with me that day. She calmed me down and applauded my quick thinking on shutting the door. She told me to never open the front door again unless it was someone I knew, and even then not to do so if I was home alone, which I wasn't for a very long time. After my parents pulled into the driveway like a bat out of hell and my mom hugged me tighter than she ever had before, I was crying. She was crying. I got a big lecture on opening the door for strangers and how lucky I was to be alive. My brother got an even sterner scalding and got grounded as well, not that he cared much. He moved out shortly after. The cops took a report and surveilled the area for the two men, but they never did find them. I learned my lesson that day. I have no idea who they were or what their true intentions were, but I don't care to ever find out. When I was in my early teens, my family moved from the city out to the country. It was quite the transition, going straight from a city life to living in a house that was at least a 15-minute drive from the nearest one. My dad, however, had always dreamed of being a farmer, and since we were extremely comfortable financially, he was able to take a chance and pursue that dream. With one older brother and one younger sister, being the middle kid, I often felt like I was the bridge between the two. My brother was 16 at the time, and even though he was a pretty decent kid for the most part, like most older brothers, he occasionally liked to pick on me and my sister. I'll come back to that in a bit. My sister was 7 when we moved into the new house. It was a nice brick house on a ranch with a very large basement. The basement was half finished, meaning it had cinder block walls, but still wasn't in any way exposed to the outside. It didn't have any carpeting or sheetrock like the rest of the house. My dad and my mom put all our toys down in the basement. It was officially our playroom. Sort of not long after we moved in, though, my sister began to act very strangely. She began talking to herself when she was in the basement alone. The first time it happened, my parents asked her what was going on. She told them she'd made a new friend, Gus, an older man who liked to visit her in the basement. At first, my parents were quite alarmed, thinking someone must have broken into the house. It didn't take very long for them to determine that Gus seemed to be nothing more than a figment of my sister's imagination. Though, Gus became a regular topic of discussion concerning my sister. She would bring up all the times he would come and talk to her in the basement. Often I would hear her talking to this Gus. I would go down and check just to see if anyone really was down there. Conveniently, though, whenever I asked her, Gus had always left immediately before I came down. While the talking about Gus didn't really bother me, as I never had any imaginary friends myself and didn't understand why anyone would want to, my brother was sick and tired of hearing our sister talk about him all the time. He would just get aggravated at her and tell her to shut up about her dumb and fake friend. About 5 months later, our parents were in town, and my brother was supposed to be watching my sister and I. My brother had this weird and annoying habit that whenever our parents weren't at home, he'd sneak into my parents' room and try to grab my dad's porno tapes, then he would set them up and watch them in the middle of the living room. He did this because the picture window in the living room faced a long driveway, and he would know when my parents were coming home. My sister and I were always forbidden from going in there, not that I would have wanted to at that age. Anyway, on this day, my sister had once again been downstairs talking to Gus. I was in the kitchen grabbing myself a snack. Unexpectedly, my sister sprinted up the stairs and into the living room, surprising my brother. He had to very quickly shut the TV off. "Hey, Gus told me you were watching bad movies. You better stop that," my sister yelled at him. "Oh, my God, I'm so damn sick of hearing about this Gus," my angry brother yelled in response. "There's no such person. Stop being an idiot." Of course, my sister got upset. My brother had made her cry. I came to her defense and told him that her talking about Gus didn't really hurt us in any way. He got irritated with me and told me I was encouraging her to act foolish. When I continued to defend my sister, my brother got up and grabbed me by the arm. "Oh, yeah, fine. Well, why don't you spend some time down there with him?" Then he began to pull me over to the basement door. Now, I spent a lot of time in the basement by myself, so I wasn't really scared to be down there. Still, though, no one likes to be forced somewhere they don't want to be. And I struggled, but of course, there was no way I could overpower my brother, who easily dragged me and shoved me down to the basement. Once I was in, he locked the door and yelled at me to make sure I say hi to Gus. I was so pissed off because I didn't want to be in the basement. I suddenly remembered that there was an outside door. There was a stairwell on the side of the house that led into the basement. The door at the bottom was locked from the inside. Feeling smart after having outwitted my brother, I turned to walk to the stairwell. I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw a grown man standing in the window of that door in the stairwell, staring down at me. He held up his hand and gave me a little finger wave, then he took off. Now scared shitless, I ran up the stairs to the inside door my brother had locked and began to pound on it, screaming at my brother to open the door. I was yelling, there was someone in our yard. Finally, I was able to get my brother to respond and let me out. I told him about the man in the stairwell. He sprinted out into the yard to look around, but of course, no one was there. He initially chalked it up to me just wanting to give him a hard time about being an asshole. But when I described the man to my sister, she smiled and said, "Yeah, that was Gus." It was really freaky. I mean, I don't know who Gus was, or if he meant my sister any harm. According to her, she never saw him again after. 4 months on end, though, my sister had been playing with an imaginary friend who was anything but imaginary. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.